how can we expect to see new parts of ourselves if we never actually venture out to see them? I think sometimes we get it misconstrued when it comes to the establishment of who we are and how that truly progresses. I think sometimes the difficulty in life and the difficulty in our exploration isn't because things are actually difficult. It's because we don't actually make any steps towards them. I think there's a Seneca quote that goes, it's not that things are difficult that we don't venture, it's because we don't venture that things are difficult. I think that we have to sort of learn that it's always about the newness that we allow to be part of the world that we inhabit. I think whenever we take steps forward, we open ourselves to seeing new things that lie in front of us. But when we stay stagnant, all we're left with is the things that are familiar, the things that already have occupied our time. And I think it's important to be grateful for the time that things took up and grateful for the time that they no longer do. I think if we always live in reference to our past and our previous appreciations, then what currently is won't get the appreciation it truly deserves, ourselves included. And I think when it comes to giving yourself some type of appreciation through that, it really is about venturing. I think that one of the greatest things that we can ever do for our affirmation is to continue to move forward. I think when we're not so worried about whether or not we're able to take steps on our path or whether or not we can achieve some type of goal or cross some type of obstacle, we actually begin to do it. It becomes about the doing rather than the perception of what is done. And I think when it becomes something more than perception, then that's when it really is in the world. That's when it really is characteristic of your life. And I think that's what alignment truly is. It's our ability to give realness to our own experience and authenticity and validity to our own experience, and recognize that how we experience ourselves is truly how we experience our path and how we experience our goals. In that way, if we can learn to tune ourselves and our feeling, our emotion, and our attitude towards venturing, towards exploration in the real world, then we can sort of learn to derive our happiness not in the essence of what we see, but in essence of the one being able to see it. I think sometimes we have to recognize that beauty doesn't escape the moment, and it's typically us. And when I say it's typically us, I mean it's typically our relationship to certain situations or our relationship to previous situations that takes our mind out of the present enough to see the beauty that is always around us or always within us to a certain degree. I think if we can recognize that how we feel is truly how our entire experience is, whenever we experience happiness from beauty, we too are a part of it. And I think in recognizing our part in the present moment, our part in our own happiness, our part in our own appreciation, we recognize that it's always really been us. It's always really been us venturing through our own cycles of emotion, our own cycles of, doubt, disbelief, belief, and courage. It's always us teeter-tottering on some type of scale, and I think the only way to sort of break that cycle is to continue to move forward, not necessarily around the same idea. And when I say around the same idea, I mean sometimes we ground our mind in such a familiar place that we start to think that we don't have anything left to grow from, or anything left to do, or anything left to see in a way. And I think once we stop acknowledging each moment, each day, each step of our life as new, we start to not experience new things within the life that we live. And I think there's no greater, I wouldn't say fear, but there's no greater limitation than our own stagnation. I think it's because we are stagnant sometimes that we feel like we're limited, because we've decided for ourselves that this is the end of our journey, this is the answer, this is the end. And when I say that, I don't necessarily mean that if you've like settled down and you have some type of good established home base in relationships, that you shouldn't be doing that you should be out there, exploring more in that regard. I really mean it in terms of ourselves and our understanding, in terms of our allowing ourselves to continue to see the world in a greater beauty and continue to work on things that actually contribute to our lives. And I was talking about it the other day, how sometimes we lose our ability to sort of harvest in a way by constantly focusing on watching our seeds grow instead of planting more seeds. I think sometimes in our effort to watch how things grow and make sure they grow in a way that befits us, we lose our ability to plant new things over and over again. And I think True success, or not even true success, I feel like everything in life is an opportunity for your investment towards yourself. And in learning how to plant more seeds and learning how to invest in yourself through and throughout and allow your actions to truly be representative of that, then we sort of experience the result of it almost instantaneously. And when I say that, I really just mean actually coming into what we do with a certain amount of intention, or being present enough to ascribe an intention that allows you to uh, take some type of characteristic alignment from whatever you're doing. Be able to derive some type of value from whatever you're doing. Like I don't know, if I'm writing in the morning, actually addressing and acknowledging the fact that it is benefiting me in some type of way, or I'm doing it for myself, giving myself a chance to be seen and validating and affirming myself through the actions that I'm doing to make myself more readily loved, to help practice self-love, to help practice self-appreciation, giving the self actual stage to be. And now no longer performing because you're starting to give yourself your own applause. I think it's important to laugh at our own humor all the time. I think laughing at your own humor is one of the most important things that we can do. And I don't even mean that in a comedic sense. I mean in the sense of appreciating our own viewpoint and recognizing that everyone is living in their own personal world. No matter what, everyone is going to experience the same thing differently. And I think it's important to acknowledge that individual perspective so you can actually understand the things that have caused you to be that way. And not to say that the way you are is negative, but to say that if you don't associate with that, or if you don't like that to a certain degree, or if part of you is seeking out change, so you can recognize what is currently wounded, what's currently needs to be treated so you can treat it. If we can't heal what we don't acknowledge, then we must acknowledge who we are. And we must acknowledge the things that are sort of pulling our strings, so we're actually granted an opportunity to pull our own. When we pull our own strings and truly guide ourselves through what is, then there's no greater, respite, no greater experience in life than that. I think when we learn to appreciate and validate ourselves in reference to how aligned we are with what we actually desire, we'll learn that each step of the process and each piece and part of things that we do to get towards our end goals are worth the appreciation of the end goal. And in giving ourselves exactly what we need in terms of our validation and security reference to our goal, where we are, we actually promote ourselves to do rather than think. And I think thinking sometimes takes us away from the objective. I think thinking isn't the objective because we can think ourselves to an end. We can think ourselves to oblivion. And I think if all we could do is think about it, then it's probably not worth thought. Not to say that issues that we have no direct control over don't need to be regulated, talked about, because that is a way of doing something. But I think when it comes to our own mental hysteria about our need for validation from certain sources and certain things to look a certain way for us to actually move forward in our life is unbefitting. If all we could do is think about that sort of limitation, then it's probably not worth thinking about, because our limitations are only going to be more and more enforced by our constant thought about them, by our constant reinstantiation, our constant keeping our mind refreshed with it. And I think that's what keeps us cyclic sometimes, is our inability to posit new thoughts and allow ourselves to not assign so much meaning to what's familiar in terms of our current life experience. We can experience life in a completely different way tomorrow. And it's important to sort of acknowledge that for yourself, so you're making sure you choose a way of looking at things that allows you to experience it the way you want to. And I don't mean this in a delusional sense. I mean this in the sense of we're all already experiencing our own viewpoint. You lose nothing in changing your viewpoint to make yourself experience it better. And I don't mean that in a way of being overtly delusional and not being honest with yourself. I think there's a certain point of honesty that's necessary in order for any of us to be granted a real space, at least by ourselves. Like, I recognize when I'm not acting in ways that are befitting of me, quote unquote, I can't really allow myself to feel aligned, to give myself that type of validation. And I think while self-love has no condition, there are easier ways to love yourself when you are aligned with what it is that you actually want. And I don't mean that to say that we have to derive our love from what we do, but to say that when we're actually doing something, we're practicing love for ourselves, because we're doing something that we want that contributes to something that we desire. And if we're doing that, then we have to affirm ourselves for doing it because we're doing it for us. I think part of the venture that allows it to be so beautiful is its way of affirming you through doing. Its way of affirming you by each step you take. Recognizing that the first step always reveals the second and being excited for that second step, being excited to take the most adjacent step, the closest step. So it's whatever it is that you want. I think many of us try to move mountains before we want to move pebbles and rocks. And I think it's important to move those pebbles and rocks, not with reference to the whole mountain, but with the happiness of recognizing you're moving part of the mountain already. But recognizing we're already doing part of our part in achieving something. And I think we're doing that not even when we're doing anything. You're already achieving part of what you need to achieve by being you, because you're somebody who can achieve that certain something. And you've built yourself up and you're committed to this way of being that allows you to do that certain thing. And we need to appreciate ourselves for that as well, because that is one of the most beautiful things that is part of our experience, is recognizing that we get to experience us more than anything. And I don't mean that in a way of narcissism or a way of saying, oh, I want to experience myself only and only me. But to say that's all we ever do. That's all anyone ever does. Even if I'm experiencing someone else, I'm experiencing myself through, or experiencing them through my experience of myself. And that's beautiful too. Because in that way, none of us are really that separate. All of us are always invited into the worlds of each other, and we need to learn how to share that world in a way that accommodates all of us. And I think that always starts with us learning how to accommodate ourselves, so we can actually recognize the things that we actually want for ourselves, recognize what type of value we want to posit within our character, posit within our action, posit within our attitude that will allow us to continue to move forward. I think the entire adventure of life is really about the time that you give towards your change, the time that you give towards your adventure. And I don't mean that to say everything has to be lived in effort. I mean that it has to be lived in awareness. It has to be lived, period. And I think that's the way to live, is to be beyond our mind, in front of our mind, to be beyond our thoughts about what life is. Because life isn't something you think about it. Life is something you are. And until we learn how to just be and be void of thought about that sort of conditioning, we'll learn how to live in our lives in proportion to what we actually want to do, rather than what we think is just right, what we think is okay, what we think is permissible. And I don't mean that with work. I don't mean that with, the whole societal structure, even though that is part of it. I mean that to say that when we are actually living in a certain awareness of our life, we can learn to give ourselves appreciation in proportion to what we need. And we can learn to live and bring stuff into our life that will actually be characteristic of the life that we want to live, rather than thinking that it's all random and it has nothing to do with our own contribution. You're always pushing out what life is. If this is your personal world, then everything around you in that way is your life. And everything you do alters and controls your life. I think we can all recognize moments where when we started to feel good or started to do something that actually contributed to us, things just started going our way. Things just started moving and the ball started rolling. And I think at a certain time we resort back to what's familiar. And I think in that way we lose our momentum. And it's important to keep going with that momentum, not in the essence of continuing to run and feeling like you have to keep up in a chase, but not running away from yourself in the present. The best way to keep the ball rolling is to be where you are, consciously, presently, and doing the things that actually contribute to you. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you very much. I appreciate each and every one of you, and I hope you're taking care of yourself, doing what you can, what you have. As you guys know, book pre-order is already out. Y'all should have been checked it out. If you haven't, thank you. If you have, thank you anyway. Keep being great. Until next time.